Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Did I just chase one of my guests away? I did. But yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. This is the Serene View, and I'm Serene, your host. And this week, again, we are talking about constructive argument. For those of you who have no idea what that is, we are trying to advocate for a more healthy way of disagreeing and for all of us to be able to kind of see different views of the same issue rather than be polarized. So that's the whole point. Today, what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about, should we talk to strangers? Yes. Now, today I have 4 guests, not just like one, 4 guests, okay? And they are amazing people. So firstly is Kerrie. Kerrie is the lady who traumatizes strangers. Not only does she traumatize strangers, she goes around to different countries for the last 16 years telling people to also traumatize strangers by talking to them, right? So, Kerrie, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes. Well, I don't think I've ever had a stranger say that I've traumatized them. Hopefully, I've brought a little sparkle to their day. And I think that that's something that we can do every day, just put a little light into somebody's world, which could be a little dark. And at the moment, there's a fair bit of that. So encouragement is my thing. So if I can encourage people, then absolutely I will take the opportunity to do that and help people find the confidence to do that themselves, because I am surrounded by so many difference makers, and I think I have some on the call here tonight. So let's do that. Let's be confident to talk to strangers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kerrie. And then we have Connor. Connor is the CEO's caddy. He helps the CEOs with everything, including golf. So if you're a CEO who needs a caddy, you know who to look for. Connor, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, all. Connor O'Malley. I'm a Scot with an Irish name and an English accent who's now an Australian. So I cover all international bases. And, you know, similar to Kerrie, talking to strangers for me is a privilege. It's really about the opportunity to understand where someone else is coming from, which means they're not a stranger. And at the same time, my goodness, how we can potentially learn from talking to a stranger. So let's see where that takes us this evening. Thanks, Serene.
Well, thank you, Connor. And lastly, we have Dr. Ram. Now, Dr. Ram is an educator. No, you see, on every panel, we must have a smart one, right? So a professor, an educator, an academician. So on this panel, Dr. Ram is fulfilling that role for us. So Dr. Ram, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Serene, for this opportunity. And well, I'm an educator by profession and a student by occasion. That's it to start with. Happy to be part of this panel.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. And before we start, right, we must declare kind of conflict of interest. So we are all part of the book, How to Talk to Strangers. I know I'm like stringing this on all my viewers. Yes, so we're all part of this book. And at the end of it, we're all going to convince you to buy the book. But no matter what it is, if you like disagree with us, you don't feel you should be talking to strangers, put it in the comments. Let us know. Okay, so let's start first with definitions. Okay, so before this panel, Kerrie was given advice by her son that says, if you want to go for a debate, the first thing you must do is definitions. So Kerrie, would you like to define for us, what is a stranger?
Strangers are people, really, because I think instantly you might think of strangers as somebody that you pass on the street or somebody that you've never set eyes on. But I think we can sometimes find a stranger sitting on our couch, on our lounge, that we have known for years, but maybe we don't even know how they think anymore. So really, it's a word that we use, but I'm talking about connecting with people.
And when we talk about talking to strangers, right? I mean, one of the things that has gone in this past week when we have looked at all these different articles is really about how much we talk to strangers. Because we all, I mean, just today, yet another person sent my online purchases to me, right? So we all talk to strangers a fair amount. We talk to servers, we talk to couriers, we talk to people. And do you find that, does it matter how we talk to strangers? Is there any benefit in it? I'm going to leave it as a free for all, but then I know that the Irish are very reserved people, so I'm going to call on Connor first.
Well,
Yes.
I don't know about the Celts. I don't know about the Celts being reserved. What's emerged for me in terms of the definition of strangers hasn't really until literally this evening, just now, when Kerrie shared her definition. I just went straight to humanity, and it's strangers are part of humanity, and we're all part of humanity. And then the other thing that emerged for me, my wife Paula and I, we were out walking just the other day, and there was this lady, and we were stopped at a traffic lights, and she had one of these. I'll say newfangled bikes that kind of, help you go uphill a bit more quickly, kind of, pseudo electrical bikes. And, we ended up talking to this lady, literally crossing the road, and she was sharing how great it was. And then we got talking about how her husband was kind of getting one as well. And then their friends were getting one. And it was becoming like a wonderful conversation. And how she was also, using it from a fitness perspective. And then there was a hill as Paul and I were walking up the hill. This lady, almost like Mary Poppins, kind of floated by, and she waved to us, and I went, "Go, girl!" like this. And it was just what a wonderful. What was that? 3-4 minutes. Humanity, humanism at its best. Brought a smile to 3 people's faces. Never see her again. No idea what her name was. Now that's. I actually said to Paula, because of course of the book, and I said, "That's talking to strangers."
Well,
Yes.
So I'm going to ask actually, Dr. Ram, because you're a teacher, right? And my whole life, right, my parents, my teachers have been telling me, stranger danger, never talk to strangers. So what do you think? Do you talk to strangers?
Well, I go with the lines of what you said. I belong to a country, I'm from India. I belong to a country where every single child is taught not to talk to strangers, stay away from strangers. But interestingly, all through our life, we end up communicating to our strangers. And when you ask me, like, do you speak to strangers? Well, every single student, every single year who comes into my campus is a stranger. But it ends up into a different conversation, and we move lifelong. So talking to a stranger is not new, but at the same time, talking to a stranger should be with caution and also to probably learn what we want to learn.
So I've posted into the groups to ask people who are listening to us, do you talk to strangers? Cohen has responded that he talks to strangers. Have you ever been harmed by a stranger, Cohen, or helped by a stranger? So, Kerrie, you want to rebut that about how you should be, careful with strangers?
Well, I think that, yes, we should be careful. However, sometimes that being careful gets in the way. That takes over too much. And a lot of countries that I've traveled to, people have said, in our country, we're told don't talk to strangers. And it's pretty universal. But I have to say, my parents didn't teach me that. Maybe they were neglectful, but I think they actually demonstrated how to talk to strangers, to connect with people, to show hospitality. And we actually, something that Dr. Ram said, it's actually in the testimonial that he wrote in the book, something about the energy that we give out. We attract that. And I think when we're going into the world with a spirit of generosity and curiosity, Connor learned something about those bikes the other day because he was curious. And so, yes, we need to be mindful, we need to be careful, but we can't let unnecessary fear or the fear of others get in the way of us connecting with people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I can see Serene talking. But
yes, I know. This is like the #1 phrase of last year and this year. I'm on mute. Yes. Okay. Yes, obviously. Of course. Yes. No, but I wanted to say Cohen has written to say that he's both helped and harmed by strangers. Right. And obviously today, I'm here to argue against talking to strangers. So I want to know, Cohen, tell us, how have you been harmed by strangers? I mean, what fears are there when we talk to strangers? And while
that's coming through, Serene, the word that's emerging for me is awareness.
Yes.
And we have a responsibility, arguably at all times, to have an awareness of our surroundings. I talk in my coaching practice around this notion of observing, from ourselves inside out. So are we observing what we're feeling? Are we observing our physiology? So that could be awareness. And then, purely from an environmental perspective, are we aware of our surroundings? So observe, choose, act. In this case, it's really around the observe. And are we then making the right choice to talk to a stranger? And then, I talk about language is action, and the action is having the conversation. And as Kerrie knows, how long is it? 11 minutes in, Kerrie, can't resist this one. As we know, a conversation creates a new reality. And it's creating a reality from that notion of awareness, or I would say observe. So, and if I may share one little funny story, is when the book was published and it came out, last week, and I shared it with my family, and my son texted me and said, he's 28, and goes, well, that isn't what you told us. I just got this text. That was it. Well, that isn't what you told us. So yes, I had to have a conversation with myself, going, yes, parenting skills, don't talk to strangers. So but it made me laugh, but also it's so true, because there's no doubt, as a parent with young children back in the day, that would have been a message for sure. So it's actually a difficult message to get across, because, for those of us who are parents, I would say more often than not, we would say, don't talk to strangers. So we're contradicting ourselves in a way. There you go.
Okay. I think we all are parents. I think all 4 of us are parents. So yes, guilty as charged. I have been telling my kids, do not talk to strangers. Yeah. I actually even tell them, do not talk to people that you know, but out of the presence of your parents. So that's even that. But I love what Cohen said, right? Cohen said, look, if I talk to them first, they cannot harm me. So it's like, it's this preemptive strike, right? Harm them before they can harm you, So I love the idea that we should now go and talk to them, so that, that we won't have to worry that they are going to harm us. I mean, what do you think, Dr. Ram?
Well, whether it is a stranger or a friend, we come across interesting characters in life. So we can't just probably say only strangers can harm you. It could be a friend also who can harm you. So you need to insulate yourself. You need to be aware of things. You need to observe and understand things to make sure that you're not on the wrong side, or probably you're not taken for granted. People, to me, come into life for a season, or for a reason, or for a lifetime. So strangers come in different forms. And I don't think that strangers can harm as long as you allow them to harm you.
Yes. So Kerrie wants to defend that. Obviously, no, she cannot take that we're talking about strangers harming us. Go, Kerrie.
I think I'm defending Cohen, actually, because I can see that when you make the first move, like you're the first person to smile, and this is something I've shared in social media over the years, be the first person to smile, because that can disarm somebody. If they are thinking fearfully about us, like, who is this person approaching me, or going to walk past me, then when they see you break into a smile and say good morning, then their fear dissipates. And we see that, and I've seen that many times, and it comes back to what Connor was saying, and Dr. Ram just did too, about observing what's going on. So I remember years ago just walking down my street, and I saw a man not dressed very well at all. Maybe he was, working as a shearer, had just come in from a farm, or maybe he just didn't really get dressed much that day. Shearers here wear singlets, and they just look a bit rough. And I could have felt a little intimidated, but I decided to just, smile and say good morning or good afternoon in that instance. And then I realized, it's okay. But if I sort of looked at him suspiciously, then he feels judged, then his walls go up. So what Cohen is saying is it's really important to think about, how are we appearing in the world? Because that's what people respond to. So get in first with your smile so that they don't see you as a threat.
And if I may, on that, it comes from the inside out. So, many of us in our different ways, in terms of the work that we do, talk about from the inside out, this observation and feeling. And what I heard you say there, Kerrie, is you felt it from the inside out, and then it showed on your face. So again, the authenticity shows through, because it came from within. It came from within your way of being. that's the way you want to show up to that person in a singlet.
Yeah.
Well, when you are in
Go on.
when you're in a conversation, you can figure out the vibes that you get, or probably the vibes you have. So that's
Absolutely.
a best indicator. Smile, as Kerrie said, is a fantastic opener, but the vibes keep you going, or probably
Yes.
withdrawing. That's how it works.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, Connor, I mean, Cohen has written to agree with you that you have to be aware of your surrounding. And I've actually written into the different platforms to ask, have you ever been harmed by a stranger? I mean, has there ever been an incident where a stranger has harmed you? So I was shook. How to say shaken down? As in, like, a stranger came up to me and went like, "Give me money and give me money now." And this guy's like 2.5 feet taller than me and looks as though he might be homeless. So I like basically, here, take it, But have any of you ever been harmed? And you can share about some of these stories of being harmed by strangers. And what did you take away from that? I mean, what did you learn from that? Being harmed by a stranger. Yes. Okay. And now we're going to talk about this, which is there a way to talk to strangers? Like, you've been talking so much about this energy that you put out, right? Like, is there a, kind of good way, or I don't know, less likely to go wrong way of talking to strangers? Does any of you want to start?
Absolutely. I would say start with honesty, because if we show up honestly, then people see that. And so that goes as far as being okay with awkward moments, because that's honest and it's raw and we don't like it, but other people don't mind it as much as we do. So so many times things have happened, connections have been made because there's a raw, vulnerable, honest moment. And one time I fell in the street in Sydney because I had luggage and my heel got stuck in the pavement. And this girl rushed over and she said, the exact same thing happened to me. And it was, not the way that you want to meet somebody, but then you walk down the street together and make this lovely connection. So many times things have happened like that. And I just think when we are honest, then people don't have to be suspicious about what is it that they're hiding, because we can sense that, can't we? Yeah. I'd love to go back to the parent conversations. Can I go there?
Sure. Go ahead. Those of you who are online, right? Text us and tell us, right? I mean, are you a parent? Have you told your kids, do not talk to strangers? Tell us. Okay, come, Kerrie.
So I haven't had as much practice as some of you guys because I just had one. But, I wanted to do a really good job. So my son was 12 when I started writing Do Talk to Strangers, which is my first in this kind of series. And, I would say things like, oh, could you please go and ask the waitress for some sugar or a straw or something? And he'd say, Mum, I don't talk to strangers. That's your thing. And I'm like, you know what? How are you going to get a job? Like, this is a safe environment to talk to strangers. And I think I picked that up from not just my parents, but a stranger I met on a flight to Sydney, and she had 2 young girls, and one of them was seated next to me, and then she was sitting on the other side of the aisle with the other daughter. And we got talking about talking to strangers, and she said, well, we need to teach our children how to talk to strangers, because you can't just say don't talk to strangers because, the police are strangers. We've got to tell them which strangers to talk to. Like if they get lost in the mall, to look for a mum, to look for somebody in uniform. And I just really liked her perception, her perspective. Yeah, so I learned from other parents too, and hearing her say we shouldn't tell our kids don't talk to strangers, because that's confusing, because then they see us talk to a stranger at the grocery store or when we're out at a picnic and we start talking to strangers. So kids are confused, and we need to teach them how to talk to strangers and when it's appropriate. But it also builds their confidence when they can, just go in the restaurant to ask for something. So simple situations like that can be really helpful in building a child's confidence and paying attention to their intuition, because kids know if somebody feels safe or not. So
Kerrie, if you were to say it's not binary, is it? What I'm hearing is this is clearly not binary. We're not saying do talk to strangers with nothing, following it, and we're not saying don't talk to strangers to our children. I'm wondering, not that this is a parental advice show here, but I'm wondering if there is something that you say do talk to strangers blah. I'm wondering there's an adjective or something that emerges out of this conversation that for any parents listening out there, or any future parents, or for us maybe grandparents one day, we can take it on board. So
yeah, well, I think it's about...
Yes, so Dr. Ram, yes, I'm muted again. I'm always muted. But anyway, Dr. Ram. Look, I think he don't just has kids, right? He's teaching kids every day. So he will have words of wisdom. Tell us, Dr. Ram, what did you say?
Yeah. Strangers are entire lives that I have not lived and can live if I talk to them. I can learn what to do with my life when I hear what they did with theirs. I can hear what not to do also. When it comes to education, I'm doing what I'm doing by the stories that I've heard from my students. And today, I think all of you are aware of, there is something called as a human library. Yes. Human library is a library of people. It replaces books with human beings. The concept might be new here, but the first human library started in Copenhagen in Denmark in 2000. It is an international organization that aims to challenge prejudice against social contact among people. People come up, tell their stories, and the other people listen to it. When it comes to strangers, I think the energy decides how far we go into that particular space with the stranger as such. I always believe that speak the way in which others love to listen, and listen the way in which others love to speak. That's the one thing that kicks me going on with the strangers.
Beautiful.
And I think we kind of agree with you in terms of speak the way that you want to listen and listen the way you want to speak. But I kind of think that at the end of the day, I don't know how to explain this to you, right? But there is the Serene who is here with you now, and there's the Serene who is a parent that's not quite the same, And like what Stella is saying, right? Which is 100%, right? We tell our kids, don't take candies from strangers, don't talk to strangers. We tell our kids all these things that instill in them a fear of strangers. But I'm sorry to say this, but when I am the stranger, I give candies to kids all the time. I am the stranger, danger stranger. I carry candy in my pocket so that I can give them to kids when I see them. But that's the me that's not a parent, right? If I were the parent, I'll tell my kid, don't take it from the auntie. You never know what she wants to do to you. So how do we bridge that, that gap between ourselves?
I think there should be a shift in our thinking process, purely because when it comes to the world population today, 1/3 of the world's population has been born since 2001. And they never know a non-digital world. This is the first digital generation which has come up. When it comes to India, which has got 1.3 billion people, Generation Z, Gen Z we call it as, is almost close to 472 million as on April. And their biggest advantage is technology. Today, with mobile phones, most of them are talking only to strangers. So what are you saying by saying that don't talk to strangers? Today we have different kinds of online platforms where people probably fake themselves or probably say whatever they want to say without being real or with being real. But the challenge here is that we need to probably create an awareness among the children, but by saying not to talk to strangers, we are not directing them on the right direction. Fundamentally, all of us will speak to strangers, whether we like it or not. That's how the human life exists. So maybe in our generation, we have been taught not to talk to strangers, but we ended up doing that. And most of us have not lost anything. Maybe there are occasions some people might have lost certain things, but fundamentally, they might not have probably understood the interactions or the communications as such. We need to be aware of those things. But today's generation, which is a full digital generation, cannot be told that they should not talk to strangers. Rather, we could probably tell them, be aware of strangers, talk to them, there are good ones, make sure that you are not at loss at any point of time, don't give in all information, Those kinds of things we can probably tell them. But I believe in this generation, we need to make children talk to strangers. I do that all the time. I make sure that my children end up talking to strangers, because that is where they learn. When you are in a comfort zone, you just do things what you know. When you're interacting with outsiders, with strangers, you end up probably learning new things, communicating new things. That's it. That's my take.
Yeah. That's
See
true.
whether-
I mean,
see whether
Connor,
this
are you
takes
going to disagree? Please disagree with
No,
him.
I'm not going to disagree. I'm going to maybe augment, add, stand on Dr. Ram's shoulders and learn from, use the wisdom that I've just heard. And it's what I'm going to bring into the conversation here is something that, is dear to my heart. I've written about it, and it's the notion of trust. And that's what's emerging for me in this conversation now is what is trust relative to this conversation about talking to strangers. And in something that I talk about, which is the risk factors of trust, RIS, 3 C's, the I want to introduce into this conversation is invested. And that's what's coming to me now is it's an assessment. We have to make an assessment. Trust is an assessment. It's also a verb, it's a noun, but ultimately it's an assessment if we do or don't trust somebody for certain reasons. One of those reasons is that person invested in me? Now that can be a deeply invested in terms of a long-standing deep relationship, husband, spouse, child, but also it can be, the lady on the bike used the other day. I would say for those 3 or 4 minutes that we were invested in one another. We cared for one another. So I'm wondering if the word invested is something that we could bring into the conversation, which is a critical element of trust. And does that take us anywhere in the conversation?
I actually want to ask you this, right? Yeah, sure. No, but before that, I want to ask our audiences, right? Do you feel invested in strangers? I'm sorry, but I'm sitting looking at invested in strangers. No, not me. So for those of you who are listening to us, are you invested in strangers? And yes, Dr. Ram, please
is
go.
the person invested in me? Do I feel that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, go, Dr. Ram.
I'm responding to it. In fact, I belong to a country, I come from a country where you get married to strangers.
Right.
Even today, most of the marriages in India are arranged marriages. You have love marriages and arranged marriages where the parents come together and probably decide a groom and get them married. So people in India get married to strangers. So they invest in strangers. They invest in strangers because they have to live a life together forever.
So we have listeners who agree. Stella tells us that yes, sometimes she's invested in strangers. Stella, I know you, right? So can you also invest in known people? Just kidding. But also, Suchi tells us that there are no strangers, only people that I have not met before.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying in the very beginning. Strangers are people, and we might see somebody as a stranger, but then within moments there's some connection and possibly even some sense of wanting to invest in that person. And while Serene's saying no, I don't invest in strangers, she actually wrote a story in here about how she did become invested in a young man on a train that she was quite concerned about.
This is like live proof of me not saying that, but I mean.
She forgot. And this is what I want to encourage people to do, is remember those beautiful connections with strangers, because sometimes we remember the times that it goes wrong. That Serene, you asked us, have we been harmed by a stranger? And we go, yes, but do I want to tell those stories? They're awkward and uncomfortable. And sometimes it's a misunderstanding and we feel judged by a stranger, and it's awful. And so that plays on our mind for maybe days. And yet somebody can be kind to us and we forget. We just go, oh, that was lovely. And then it goes away because it's not important to our brain to hang on to and to keep us on the lookout for more of that. So it's again about awareness and especially from my perspective, celebrating those beautiful moments where a stranger has invested in us or we've invested in somebody else.
Well, I mean, I think you've succeeded in convincing our listeners, because now Stella is denying that she knows me and now we are strangers. No, we are not strangers, Stella. Well, and we are investing time in each other. Thank you very much. Obviously, you are strangers to the other three of them, and thank you for investing your time with us. Now, let's ask the opposite, right? In all fairness, right? To say, have you been helped by a stranger? Were there instances where you were grateful to have met a stranger?
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, the stories are in the book. Let's the Qantas napkin story, which is becoming legendary, perhaps not, but maybe because of this, it's becoming legendary. So on a plane in 2006, returning back to the UK, and one of the main concerns for Paula, my wife and myself, was where do we send our children to school? And I'd been offered this opportunity of joining an organisation, was flying back to the UK, and schools were my main concern. Had a chat with this chap sitting next to me, and he told me all about the schools in Melbourne that we were interested in. And I said, and he wrote them all down on the Qantas napkin. And then I was having a chat with the flight attendant, the flight attendant, and was talking to her about schools, and she also went to school in Melbourne. And I legged it back. I don't know why I didn't get the napkin that was in front of us as we were standing I was having a drink. She clearly wasn't. Anyway, got this napkin, and on that napkin were written the schools for myself and Paula, and that completely lifted my anxiety. And those two individuals gave us schools to go and research and look at. And when we came back, we chose one of those schools that was on the Qantas napkin. That is a story of, I guess as an immigrant now who's a Scot with an Irish name and English accent, who's now an Aussie, that is my Qantas napkin story. And thank you so much to those two people. I don't know if you're on this call, you're probably not, but I thank you heartily.
Well, I mean, have any of our listeners been helped by strangers? Have any of you, received any help, been in any way helped by a stranger, even if it's as simple as you got lost and somebody came and spoke to you about it? How about you, Dr. Ram? I'm not going to ask Kerrie because she's going to tell me that she's been helped by strangers forever. But how about you, Dr. Ram? Have you ever been helped by a stranger?
Well, I'm in a profession where I am an architect and a lighthouse for many young kids at the age of between 18 to 23. And many of these small boats come sail through our direction and move off. But interestingly, the kind of difference that you make during their tenure, they stick along with you for a long time. In fact, I tweeted this yesterday. I had a call somewhere around 7:30 in the evening. There was somebody, it was an unknown number. I didn't show that number. I didn't know who it was. There was a call that came up. There was this boy named Arvind who had actually finished 15 years ago his master's program at our campus. He was a basketball player. He was like one of the best sportsmen in campus during his time. It's been 15 years since he passed out of college, and he calls me up and probably pays his respect and probably speaks certain things. I mean, like the fundamentals are how are you and things like that. So I was like wondering, okay, this was another call. Maybe he wants an admission, or maybe he's come to my town. He wants to meet up, maybe for a coffee. I was thinking all those things. This guy suddenly says, sir, you are running a program called face-to-face interaction, which is a very interesting initiative that we do in our campus. And we've done more than 200 face-to-faces so far. And this guy said, yeah. So I said, yes, we still do a lot of face-to-faces, for which his response was, sir, I'm one of those people who got inspired by that face-to-face, and I lived through life because of those kinds of learnings I had during that time. So I said, oh, okay, that's amazing to probably listen to after 15 years after finishing your college. Now, the next thing that what he shared actually puzzled me, or it made my heart smile. What did he say? He said, so the recently concluded Olympics, India won bronze in hockey. and one of the players of the team can we bring for a face-to-face? What do you say about it? Somebody whom you have done something 15 years ago, he was a student at your campus, and you have done what you should do in campus by engaging the students by different initiatives. 15 years later, he comes back, shares that he has benefited out of it, and he wants to probably bring up a friend of his who's actually a current hockey player in the Olympics for India, and won the bronze medal. And he said, after 21st, any day that you want, we can have him to probably talk to our students. So yes, it is not strangers alone that help you. There are strangers who come into your life for a season or for a reason or for a lifetime.
Thank you very much. And I guess we're coming round to the top 45 minutes. So I want to ask all of you, right? I mean, we've talked so much about strangers. We've talked about, what's good, what's bad, stranger danger, and about parenting. If you want to think about all of these things we've talked to, what are some of the insights you want to leave our listeners with in terms of talking to strangers? Who wants?
Well, if I can jump in before Connor and Dr. Ram, because they might say something even more profound, but I would wrap up with the conversation about awareness and observing what's going on, and especially observing the good, because our brain pays attention to the bad, but paying attention to all the possibilities of putting a smile on somebody's face. I love the expression Dr. Ram used, making my heart smile. We can do that for the people around us. And for many of us in lockdown, we can do that for people online or on the phone. We can actually make a phone call. So just being aware that maybe your little bit of kindness, your bit of warmth or welcome can have a far bigger ripple effect than you can imagine. So I think it's worth looking for opportunities to be kind to strangers, talk to strangers, encourage them, and also remembering that some of those strangers might be sitting in your own home. It's time to get to know people even more. So just be curious and connect with people around you.
Well, I think Suchi has written a very long agreement with Dr. Ram's words. I thought I'll read it before we go on about this. She says, there's lots of wonderful angels who help and disappear, and she's just left standing. And wow, what a wonderful thing that is. I mean, her faith in humanity gets stronger every time, and she just pays it forward, right? By helping people along the way that they meet, carry bags or point the way or accompany a child for an older person, endless opportunities to help. And one issue that she thought is how most of us face is how to discern who to help or who we shouldn't, as I guess we might have been hurt before. So like, for example, in this person's case, I mean, helped by Dr. Ram and now wanting to pay it forward to the next kids. But how do we decide, who do we help? Who would like to?
I'm a risk taker. So, and what kind of hurt are we worried about? Because if we're in a public place, sometimes the hurt is like a personal offense or it's a misunderstanding, and we don't like that. But is it worth the risk? Because we might really help somebody and just offend somebody else or get offended ourselves. But is it worth the risk? Because I think if you're in a public place, if you are physically safe, then maybe those misunderstandings, we can work through them and learn from them, because they're a gift and opportunity. So I'm a risk taker. I will keep connecting with strangers.
I think one should go through gut feeling, I guess, through their gut feeling. If their brain says, maybe like say, we should do something for this, please go ahead and do it, because kindness is free, and there is nothing wrong in doing it. And even if you're found fault, it's quite okay to probably get embarrassed at some time, because after all, we have tried to probably help somebody. So by helping others, I think you could be softer than a surgical cotton.
Yeah. How about you, Connor? I mean, what is your advice? I mean, who we should help or not help?
Right. Well, if for anybody who might be interested in some of the work I do on LinkedIn, one of my hashtags is #ForTheSakeOfWhat. And I believe that is a question that is so deep, it's not funny. It can be right down to our purpose. And it can be also kind of in the moment. And we ask ourselves, in any situation, I could put a hashtag in front of it, #ForTheSakeOfWhat. And if we can answer that question with regards to this context of talking to a stranger, and come up with a good reason for ourselves that is in service or supports that other person, that is really about them and not about me, or it might be about me because I need help. So that's my, I guess you might say, final take, is ask yourself, for the sake of what? And if you can't come up with a good reason not to, then do it.
Nice.
Fair enough. Okay, so I think some of us have kind of, looked at it. Okay. So yes, bye, Stella. Keep safe too. Talk to strangers or not? Decide. Keep safe. Keep safe. Okay. And then Cohen is talking about the essence of a walking, talking holder of psychological safety, right? That as a facilitator, actually we do this all the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes when we are outside, we kind of feel a bit more vulnerable. I mean, I can remember the number of times I have tried to help strangers and been brusquely go like, give my seats to old ladies who go like, I look very old, is it? Why are you giving your seat to me? So I think some of these things make us a little bit more, I won't say I'm harmed,
Serene,
but I'm
if I may,
embarrassed. Yeah, go on. Yes.
And this came up in a conversation that Kerrie and I had, and with others, I think, in the book. It was on the book launch. Kerrie, it might even have been yourself, who said, went to help somebody and they kind of brushed me off and said, no, no, no. And somebody on the book launch, I thought it was really powerful. And hence, for me, I'm sharing it now in the context of what you just said, Serene, is that may well be so in that moment. However, that there's a possibility that person got home, went home and went, geez, I wasn't in a great space, but I'm so glad that person at least tried. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know what happens behind the scenes or later on. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess for the people who are kind of like, for me, I kind of feel, I got a bad outcome. I was embarrassed. Of course, this was when I was a bit younger. Now I've grown older and my skin has grown thicker and, it's so easy to get embarrassed anymore. But I think what it is really thinking about how and where do we help people. And is it like what Dr. Ram says, right? We come from a place of helping regardless of the outcome. That is where we are coming out from.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last thing is, I wanted to ask our viewers, has this conversation convinced you to talk more to strangers or less to strangers? Are you now more worried about talking to strangers? Do you feel that you will talk more to strangers, you will talk less to strangers? And tell us what you think. Okay. And have we all gotten our last words in? I know Dr. Ram must get the last word because you're an educator, right? The teacher always must have the last word. Oh, hello, Johnson. Hi. Hi. We're just kind of ending. Do you want to say something provocative to tell us off? Do you talk to strangers? Is it terrible to talk to strangers? That's what we're talking about today. And we have an esteemed academician here who will give us the last word. Dr. Ram, go ahead.
Believe in the best of everything. Don't judge. Just have the curiosity, childlike curiosity, and put in the energy to probably just learn and know people. And different stories make your life. And I've been driven by just strangers all through my life, and I'm enjoying every single day. And every day happens to be a new day for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so for those of you who are still listening to us, here comes the sales pitch. we all part of this book, okay? And we're all part of this book about talking to strangers. We all are trying to advocate people talking to strangers. Not so much because we all want you to have stranger danger, but a little bit because I think in this COVID generation, we're all stuck at home. And if I don't talk to strangers, I will be climbing the walls, because I'm stuck with all of those people at home. So I think we hope that, this book, which is really a whole collection of, kindnesses done by strangers to all of us, will inspire you to think a little bit better of the guy next door, rather than look at him going like, are you spreading COVID to me? At least, think of it as a little bit more better. Okay, so yes, Manashi has... Hi, thank you very much, Manashi. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you've learned a little bit from this. Oh, don't judge a book by its cover. Guilty as charged.
right.
I have been arguing against talking to strangers even though I contributed to the book. Guilty as charged, Johnson. You know me well. Yes. So thank you very much. We are going to have a continuation of this conversation on Clubhouse. For those of you who have no idea what is Clubhouse, Clubhouse is the app that we're all trying to use to pretend to be younger by 20 years than what we actually are. See? So, yes, so we are all going on Clubhouse. It will be this coming, depending on where you are. If you're in North America, it's Friday evening. If you're in Asia, it's Saturday morning. Also in Australia, it is Saturday morning. And we're all going to have this conversation. And the lovely thing about Clubhouse is you can come on and really like vocally and directly argue with us. And I welcome you to do that. Okay, so this is Serene. On behalf of all of my guests today, Kerrie Phipps, also Connor, and also Dr. Ram. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.